What's up, everybody? It's April 7th, 2021. In this video, we're going to break down the numerical riddles that sat underneath the NCAA National Championship game that was played this past Monday, April 5th, won by Baylor University. Now, we're going to talk about how this event connects to another significant event in Waco, Texas, which is the home of Baylor University. This was the 1993 Waco siege at the Branch Davidian Mount Carmel compound in April of 93. Now, sometimes I forget how old I am, so this thing was pretty long ago. We're almost 28 years since this siege took place. And for those of you who weren't around back then, understand this was huge news. It was in the national media pretty much every single night. And we found out about everything all the way up through the ending date of the siege. Now we'll talk about both the beginning and ending dates of this event, and how the head coach of Baylor University, Scott Drew, is freakishly numerically connected to David Koresh, who is the infamous leader of the Branch Davidian compound. Before we get into the comparisons between Baylor's championship win and the 1993 Waco siege, however, we're going to talk about some other pretty strange coincidences involving this game. And we start with the fact that just 2 weeks before this game, we had the death of NBA Hall of Famer Elgin Baylor. And Elgin Baylor died at the age of 86 back on March 22nd, right around the start of the tournament. And again, this is no regular basketball player. Baylor was a Hall of Famer who won an NBA championship with the Lakers and appeared in many finals. His death fell 14 days before the title game, and the anniversary of the Waco siege fell 14 days after the title game, so we'll look at more with that. But there's some other coincidences with Scott Drew that are pretty difficult to ignore. We start with the fact that Scott Drew attended Butler University, and Butler is in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the championship game was played in Indianapolis, Indiana. Baylor's victory over the Gonzaga Bulldogs ensured that the Indiana Hoosiers would be the last undefeated team in the NCAA men's basketball season. And that happened 45 years prior to this game. Now, 45 is a significant number to this game. Notice how Hoosiers equals 45. Again, the entire tournament played in Indiana. The Hoosiers, the last undefeated team. But notice the year that Baylor was founded. Baylor University, founded in the year 45. Their team name is the Bears, which equals 45. And the 45th prime number is 197. And this stands out because Baylor University equals 197, and their coach, Scott Drew, was born in the year 1970. So, it's interesting that he attended Butler and won the title in the same city he went to school, because the MVP of the NCAA tournament was one of his players named Jared Butler. So, what are the odds of that, right? But of course, this goes much deeper, as we will soon see. Now, there's a pretty big riddle with the Scott Drew family. Now, Scott Drew comes from a family of coaches. His father, Homer Drew, was the longtime coach of Valparaiso. In fact, Scott Drew coached at Valparaiso for 1 year. Scott Drew's brother, Bryce Drew, is also an NCAA Division I basketball coach. The team that he coaches, Grand Canyon, made their first appearance in the NCAA tournament just this season. And when we look at Bryce Drew, this opens up a whole new level of, or layer of synchronicities. So notice how Scott Drew has reduced birth numerology of 23. The name Scott equals 23, with the S exception, so does the name Drew. He's the coach at Baylor University, whose logo is BU, and B the second letter, U the 21st. Notice how BU equals 23. BU, 221, isn't it interesting, right? Winning the title in the year 2021. But back to the number 23. Scott Drew was hired as the head coach of Baylor in the year 2003. Born on the 23rd day of the month. And in the title game, he gave Gonzaga their 23rd title loss. Now, this is a very significant number to Gonzaga. The university is named after Saint Gonzaga of the Society of Jesus. And Saint Gonzaga is said to have died at the age of 23. Curious that they say he died while caring for victims of a serious epidemic. Well, of course, we're being told now that we're in a major epidemic, which we are not, but the news would tell you differently. So this brings us back to Bryce Drew. Now, you may have heard of Bryce Drew. Back in the year 1998, he hit one of the most famous buzzer beater shots in tournament history when his, I believe it was a 13 seed, upset a 4 seed. And at the time, Bryce Drew was playing for Homer Drew, who was also the father of Scott. Now, if you measure from Bryce Drew's buzzer beater to the date that his brother won the national championship, it was 23 years and 23 days. The word shoot is 23, so is the phrase buzzer beater. So like we mentioned, Bryce Drew, now the coach at Grand Canyon University. Grand Canyon lost in the first round of this year's tournament. And isn't it interesting that one of their players, Oscar Freyer, allegedly died at the age of 23, just after his team got eliminated from the tournament. And not only was this player 23 years old, but he also died on March 23rd. Said that this was in a car accident. Now, Grand Canyon has this gematria of 666. This was a really significant number to the game, which involved the Gonzaga Bulldogs, which equals 999 in the same cipher. 666 is connected to the number 95. The championship game was played on the 95th day of the year. This is also the gematria of the shot, which is what they call Bryce Drew's shot from 1998. So all of that is pretty interesting. This is just scratching the surface here of the numerology of this game. So, needless to say, Baylor's victory is connected to the death of Elgin Baylor, who was 86 years old when he died. Well, that makes it pretty interesting that Baylor University scored 86 points in the championship game after Baylor was 86th at the age of 86. Remember, human sacrifice and blood sacrifice both summing to 86. Now, to take this a step further, Elgin Baylor played his entire professional basketball career for the Lakers. And in the Lakers' last game before this championship, they also scored 86 points. And notice how they played Los Angeles, the Lakers against the Clippers. I pointed out how the Lakers finished this game with a 31-19 record. 31-19 is the 444th prime number. These numbers connected in killing rituals. Killing 319 and 444. And this was a big number actually in the Super Bowl. Remember the Super Bowl this year finished with a score of 31-9. The head coach of the losing team was born on March 19th, 319. And his son, Garrett Reed, died exactly 3,109 days before the Super Bowl. Let's see if I can get the date right. I want to say it was 3,109 days. Well, you'll have to refer to my post on that, but what stood out there is that LA's 86-point game was played on Easter Sunday, or April 4th, Easter Sunday 44. And notice how Elgin Baylor's nickname was Rabbit. And his death right on the solstice connected to this game taking place one day after Easter. Now, speaking of the Lakers, we may remember there was another famous Lakers star to pass away not that long ago. That was Kobe Bryant. Now, if you measure from the death of Kobe Bryant to the death of Elgin Baylor, the other Lakers star, you get 421 days. Now, this stood out to me because 421 is the 82nd prime number. The 82nd prime number. Well, check out Baylor University in reduction. It's 82. And this year's NCAA tournament that they won was the 82nd tournament in history. And notice how the mascot, a bear, sums to 82 in reverse. So we pointed out Baylor's 86 points and why that was significant in the title game, but what about the total number of points? Gonzaga, in a losing effort, put up 70. So if you combine the point total in this game, you get 156. This brings us to the Waco siege. And notice how Waco siege sums to 156 in the reverse alphabetic order. Again, the Waco siege, nearby Waco, Texas, Baylor University, their campus in Waco. And 86 also stands out because Waco, Texas, sums to 86 in the alphabetic order. And the last name of David Koresh, you also get this 86, the leader of the Branch Davidian compound. And when you're looking at the Waco siege, you notice there were a lot of people killed in this event. And you get 4 ATF agents plus 82 Branch Davidians. That's 86. Notice how Baylor Bears even has matching gematria with David Koresh in 2 of our primary ciphers. But now we're going to look at how freakishly connected Scott Drew, the leader of the Baylor Bears, is compared to David Koresh, the other famous leader from Waco, Texas. And I pointed out how we had this synchronicity with Scott Drew going to Butler University. The MVP of the tournament was named Jared Butler, one of his players. Now notice how Jared Butler has the same gematria as David Koresh in ordinal and reverse. But the name Scott Drew also has matching gematria with David Koresh, mainly through this number 116, which we'll talk about throughout this video. The word siege equals 116, and the Waco siege occurred on a date with 116 numerology. Now, the Waco siege was in the year 93. And remember, Baylor defeated the Gonzaga Bulldogs, who scored 93 points to reach the championship game. And in order to score that 93rd point, it took a near half-court shot from Jalen Suggs. Now, Jalen Suggs was born on the 154th day of the year. That connects to the gematria of 93. But this was a major number for Saint Aloysius de Gonzaga. Notice how Saint Aloysius de Gonzaga has this gematria value of 93. Saint Gonzaga was born on the 9th of March, or 9/3. And his date of canonization, December 31st, when he was officially marked as a saint, falls 93 days before the 93rd day of the year, which was the date of this game. This was also the anniversary of the crucifixion, God's Son, Crucifix, and Nazareth 93. A significant number of Christianity, which equals 930, just like Savior. Adam lived to be 930 years in the Bible. The name Jalen equals 93. Jalen Suggs equals 930. And it was his banked 3, which equals 93, that gave Gonzaga 93 points in the game. And really, this was all pointing us to the 93 Waco siege. So, the Waco siege lasted 51 days. And this is an important number to this whole ritual, which was, of course, entirely staged. It's not reality, guys. This was a Hollywood production, played out on one of the networks where people believe it's real. Notice how Waco siege has a gematria value of 51, and Waco, Texas also equals 51. Now, the number 51 has this gematria value of 116, this number that's connected to Scott Drew and David Koresh. Now, this video is what I like to call a deep dive. So, in order to understand this riddle to its fullest, we need to look at the book of Revelation. Now, understand, the story of David Koresh is that he claimed to be the second coming of Christ, or the Messiah. And the book of Revelation is about the return of Jesus Christ, or the Messiah. And I've been doing a lot of work recently talking about how in May we have this significant lunar eclipse, which I believe the occult thinks is connected to the return of Jesus Christ. This is not, what's the word for it? Hyperbole? I had to think of the word because I'm not a hyperbole channel. And I'm trying not to stretch things and make things fantastical, but this is truly a time of revelation. And that doesn't mean it's the end times or the end of the world. It's really the greatest time. And you can see this through the coronavirus pandemic ritual. I'm actually going to cut back to my screen here. And, you know, there's this value of 293, like we see in the word plague, right? Coronavirus pandemic equals 293. And the date that it was declared a national emergency was the date that leaves 293 days on the calendar. But what does the number 293 really mean? Revelation of Jesus Christ sums to 293. So does second coming of Jesus Christ 293. And it's no coincidence that in the two primary large number ciphers, COVID-19 has the same exact gematria as Revelation 1010 and 850. We're even told that coronavirus was first diagnosed on the date 12/1 in China. Wuhan, China has this gematria of 1210 in the Jewish method. And they even said that the first case in the United States was on January 21st, 1/21. Again, the Revelation number. Revelation, an apocalyptic tale about the second coming, 121. Now, this number was coded into the championship game this year as well, which took place on April 5th. Now, Gonzaga and Baylor were supposed to play back in December, but that game was canceled on December 5th, which was exactly 121 days before they ended up really playing on the date of the championship. So this brings us to this verse in Revelation. Revelation 6:12 mentions both a solar and lunar eclipse, and it sums to 526 and 2210. And this is very important, because on May 26th, 2010, there will be a total lunar eclipse. And look at the sorrow cycle that this eclipse belongs to. 121, the Revelation number. This will even be the 55th eclipse of that cycle. Look at how the word return equals 505. Jesus the Messiah, summing to 55. So make no mistake about it, this eclipse is so significant. You know, I've been doing this research for 3, 4, 5 years. I've been talking about eclipses for damn near 4 years now. And I've been kind of softballing it up to this point. But understand, I truly believe this is a very, very significant eclipse, and I'm going to prove it with the numerology that we share in the rest of this video. Before we get there, looking back at the Gematria of Revelation, we keep looking at this number 116 and how significant it appears to be in this whole David Koresh event. And I've actually taught about the number 1160 before, and there's a pretty good reason for that. When you look at the properties of the number 1160, you notice something very interesting. Remember, this is an upside-down 9/11. And think about how on the 9/11 attacks, flights 93 and 77 both crashed on that day. 93 and 77, very significant numbers to Thelema. And this is the 1160th prime number. And this was coded into the eclipse from 2001 as well. But so when you look at the book of Revelation, there's 2 verses that sum to 1160 in the alphabetic order. The first verse leaves 116 verses left in the Bible. So that stands out. There's definitely no coincidence there. But notice this next one. It's Revelation 19:4. 19:4. Well, that sticks out because the date written, 19/4, was the date that David Koresh died, the end of the Waco siege, the 19th of April. So I also found it noteworthy that the day David Koresh died, which had 116 numerology, the FBI who stormed the compound was even 1,016 months old. The word branch equals 116. And the Waco siege was 1 month and 16 days before that year's total lunar eclipse. And remember, we're taught that the crucifixion occurred on April 3rd, 33 AD, which happens to be the date of a lunar eclipse. This one in particular, April 3rd, 33 AD, would have been just barely visible from the Holy Land. Now, the number 116 is connected to Jesus. It's the first number to sum to 985 in Gematria, which is the value of Jesus. Furthermore, consider 116 seconds is 1 minute, 56 seconds. Well, the 156th prime number is 911, which is 116 upside down. Now, this stands out because David Koresh died at the age of 33, which sums to 156. Waco siege equals 156. And this brings us back to the championship game where 156 points were scored. Also, the number 28 sums to 156. And this was the 28th victory of Baylor. And Baylor equals 28 in reduction. Sorry, I got so many posts to look through here. I got to decide what is so important. Yeah, let's continue with the numerology connecting Scott Drew and David Koresh because it's so good. So Scott Drew and David Koresh share this 116 Gematria. They also sum to 53 in reduction. And notice how Drew was hired on as Baylor's head coach on a date with 53 numerology. But check out the date that he was hired, August 22nd. Internationally, this date is written 22/8. Now, there's another date that you can write, 2/28. That would be February 28th, 228. Now that's the date of the beginning of the Waco siege. David Koresh was born Vernon Wayne Howell, which sums to 228 in reverse. Now back in the year 2018, not that long ago, we had a TV miniseries called Waco about this whole event. And notice the date that it ended. February 28th, 228. But here's where it gets really wild. The date 228 falls 2 months, 28 days before May 26th, the date of the big revelation eclipse this year. Now let's take a look at Revelation 2:28. I'm going to filter this down to Revelation 2:28. Now we get a very, very short verse. It just says, "And I will give him the morning star." So notice the gematria of this. Very intriguing verse. "And I will give him the morning star." In the standard reverse alphabetic order, we get 445. And this is a number I've been talking a lot about recently, as it's the Hebrew value of total lunar eclipse. In English gematria, this phrase, this Bible verse, sums to 2021. And what do I need to say about this? Of course, it's the year 2021, the year that this whole eclipse ritual is going on, the year of Baylor's championship. Now, about this number 445, the total lunar eclipse number in Hebrew, remember this connected to Donald Trump? Trump was born on the date of a total lunar eclipse. And Trump was the 45th man to be president, but he was only the 44th person to be president. President number 45, so 44, 45. And this was also coded, this whole 4445 thing, this is coded into Derek Chauvin as well. Notice how his age... Oh, look at this. They changed this since my last video. So, watch this. You go to the history of Derek Chauvin's page. You go back a week. And notice, yep, there it is. Look at that. His age was 44 to 45 years old, even though they knew his birthday was March 19th for months. They had him listed at 4445. This is a total lunar eclipse thing. Derek Chauvin equals 203 and 121. Remember, this is Saros 121. Total lunar eclipse equals 203, like Derek Chauvin. So, my point is that this is consistent, right? And if you measure from the birthday of David Koresh to the date that Scott Drew was hired on at Baylor, it was 44 years and 5 days. Now, this revelation total lunar eclipse will be the final full moon before lunation 1218. So you'll see the May 26th eclipse, this full moon, and then the next lunation is 1218, right? And 1218 is the gematria of total lunar eclipse. Now, if you measure from the beginning of the date, or the beginning of this Netflix series, Waco, which premiered on January 24th, 2018, to the date of the revelation eclipse, look at that, it's 1,218 days. Now, this debut, January 24th, if you instead measure to the national championship game where Scott Drew led Baylor to a victory, notice how it was 1,167 days, right, before the title game, where Waco won the title. Well, there's 11 years and 67 days separating the birthdays of David Koresh and Scott Drew. 1167. So it's all tied in together. It's pretty crazy. Now we want to look more at the number 51. I started to mention this earlier, but I didn't get all the way in. So this Waco siege lasted 51 days. Now, 51 is a big number for this entire eclipse. Think about how the word moon equals 51 in reverse. And we had this 51-day Waco siege. Well, this year's national championship game was played exactly 51 days before this revelation eclipse. And I believe this eclipse is connected to the return of the Messiah. Or at least that's what they're trying to manifest. I don't know. But here we see that Messiah equals 233 in Jewish Gematria. And 233 is the 51st prime number. Notice how the word perfection equals 51 in reduction as well. And Baylor's win kept Gonzaga from having a perfect season. When David Koresh died April 19th of 93, Scott Drew was 178 days after his birthday. 178 is a lot like how you can write Koresh's birthday, the 17th of August, or 17/8. He died in the year 1993. And we talked a bit about 93 with Jalen Suggs and how Gonzaga scored 93 points. But this number 1993 is also pretty interesting. 1993 is a prime number. Now, of course, 93 is a number of the crucifixion, right? Crucified on the 93rd day of the year between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Crucifix is 93, so it's God's Son, 93. But check out, again, 1993, the 301st prime number. If you write out the return of Jesus Christ, you get 301. And that's very relevant to the numerology of David Koresh, as we'll see. Notice how in reduction, return of Jesus Christ equals 103. So does 1993. And in ordinal, Baylor coach equals 103. Now notice how both Baylor coach Scott Drew and David Koresh both have birth numerology of 103. When David Koresh died, he was exactly 12,300 days old, like 123. The phrase crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 123. And this was also coded into the death of his mother. Notice how his mom died on January 23rd, written 123. Well, look at Scott Drew's birthday, 1023, written a lot like 123. Internationally, this date would be written 23/10, like 231. 231 is the ordinal gematria of Vernon Wayne Howell, David Koresh's birth name. When you write out 1993, you basically get all of the numbers that are relevant for David Koresh's birth numerology. Notice the 229, the 103, and the 136. He was born on August 17th of 1959, which has numerology of 103, was the 229th day of the year, and leaves 136 days on the calendar, all found in the gematria of 1993. But we focus on the ordinal gematria here, 229. Now, in the book of Revelation, it's actually the 229th verse, where it says, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast," which is 636. So a very big revelation number, 229. Now, when he changed his name, David Koresh was 11,229 days old. He died at the age of 12,299 days old. And again, born on the 229th day of the year. His mother's name, Bonnie Sue Clark, even sums to 229. And isn't it funny how David Koresh's mother was born on September 8th? That would be the same birthday as the Virgin Mary, who they say gave birth to Jesus. So the reason I point out all these 229s is because 229 is the 50th prime number. And this brings us over to Scott Drew. Notice how Drew won the championship at the age of 50. His last name, Drew, equals 50. He was born on a date with numerology of 50, and he won on a date with numerology of 50. He prevented Gonzaga from going undefeated, which equals 50. He won the championship on April 5th, or 4/5. The date numerology of the Waco siege was 45. It was at the Mount Carmel complex, which equals 45. Again, a number connected to the Baylor and the Baylor Bears. Now, one more big one that I wanted to show you. I pointed out how Elgin Baylor died 14 days before Baylor won the title. And then 14 days after they won the title was the anniversary of the Waco siege. So Elgin Baylor seems to be connected as well. Notice how he was exactly 31,600 days old when he died. 1993 Waco siege sums to 316. And remember, Jesus equals 316 in Hebrew. It's John 3:16 that best lays out the purpose of Jesus' life. So many connections between Drew and Koresh, it's just bizarre. But we're definitely not done looking at Revelation riddles. And why did Mark Few lose? Because honestly, I did think this game was coded for Gonzaga to win. Now, I didn't spend enough time decoding it. But it certainly is. Funny comment here. I swear, if this shit is tied to an eclipse. Of course it's tied to an eclipse, bro. Welcome to this channel. I don't know if you figured this out yet, but eclipses are significant. So, wow. Some of you are still really ignorant. So anyway, here we have a game with the Gonzaga Bulldogs, 999. Perfection is 666. So is the number 82. This was the 82nd tournament. Waco, Texas equals 666. And this game took place amidst mass vaccination efforts, which is 666. Gonzaga got to the finals thanks to the shot from Jalen, which sums to 666. Gonzaga 606, named after Luigi Gonzaga, 66 and 60. This number is just coded everywhere. The coach of Gonzaga, 699 months and 9 days old. He was 99 days after his birthday after being hired in the year 1999. The game was in the state of Indiana, and look how old Indiana was. You get a nice 1666 there. Indiana, the home of Hoosiers, which equals 1666. This was even connected to Gonzaga. Think about how the sixth planet from the sun is Saturn. Well, this game was 6,666 days before the 16th Saturn return since St. Gonzaga was born. Another reason I thought this was connected to the Gonzaga Bulldogs winning. So check this out. This game is definitely, it was a double riddle, as you would call it. All right, so let me try to make sense of this for you. Revelation 13:18. We just talked about this verse. It's the one that reveals the number of the beast as 666. Well, if you take the gematria of this Bible verse and add in Revelation 13:18, notice you get this value of 1603. And it stood out to me because Gonzaga Bulldogs is 163. And again, this is Revelation 13:18, right? Well, if you go backwards 1,318 days before this game, You get Saturday, August 26th of 2017. Well, what happened on that day? Well, let's just get right to it. You had the Floyd Mayweather fight against Conor McGregor. And remember, Floyd Mayweather won his 50th and final match against McGregor. The name McGregor is 50. Undefeated is 50. So it would make sense that the Gonzaga Bulldogs would also go undefeated, 1,318 days later, right? Or so I thought. But if you look deeper into the book of Revelation, I think it actually teaches you a little bit more about this game. So here we're looking at Coach Mark Few. And he was trying to go perfect. Now notice how the name Mark Few sums to 77, 32, and 40. This is the same as Christ, 77, 32, and 40. Now let's focus on the 32, because Mark Few was trying to win his 32nd consecutive game of the season to go 32-0. That would have been pretty incredible. So let's look at Revelation 3:2. And look at this. Revelation 3:2 is the only verse in Revelation to contain the word perfect. It says, "Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain, that are ready to die that are ready to die, for I have not found thy works perfect before God." So this verse explicitly says, I have not found thy works perfect before God. That's Revelation 3:2, Mark Few trying to win his 32nd straight game. So that's pretty interesting, but check out the ordinal gematria of this Bible verse. In the alphabetic order, it sums to 1132. And let me explain why that number is so big. Well, first of all, in reduction, Jesus is 11, and then Christ is 32, right? So 1132. But this Bible verse, summing to 1132. If you measured from the date that Mark Few was hired, someone linked me to a newspaper article. It was definitely July 26th, 1999, when he became the head coach. So if you measure from the date that he was hired to the date that he lost this championship game, look at this. It's exactly 1,132 weeks, right? Amazing. And just look at the numerology of this date. 151, 61, and 43. Also the 132. It's right there, 132. Mark Few equals 132 in Jewish gematria. But back to this date numerology, 151, 61, and 43. Jesus Christ, 151 and 43. And then Jesus is 61. So he loses the game and becomes 31-1. And this brings us to Revelation 3:11. Revelation 3:11 has gematria of 755. Well, that's pretty significant. Mark Few. Let's look up his stats, his coaching stats. And would you believe this was Mark Few's 755th career game coached? Just like the gematria of the verse of Revelation that's connected to his new record, 31-1. And why else is 31-1 significant? Well, consider the date 3/11 or March 11th, which can also be written 11/3. The coronavirus pandemic was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on 11/3, the 11th of March. And Aloysius Gonzaga, dead while caring for victims of an epidemic, right? Also, the beast equals 311. We're talking about 666. And 311 is the 64th prime number. As you'll see there. So how fitting that they lose to the Baylor Bears, which has matching 46 Gematria. Of course, Epidemic also 64, but Baylor Bears summing to 46. And look at this. Epidemic equals 125. Look how many games Mark Few has now lost in his career. The national championship was his 125th loss. Gonzaga losing or dying to an epidemic at 23. Mark Few and Gonzaga losing their 23rd NCAA tournament to the Baylor Bears, match which is 46. It's just amazing. All right, guys, I don't know how much more energy I have. Check the links in the description below if you want to learn more about the numerology of the 1993 Waco siege and the whole big riddle behind this game. I've been saying, too, I'm going to be doing a larger video on the numerology of Revelation. And at this point, it's actually too big for me to do in one video. There's just no way I'm going to make sense of everything I've collected in one video. Especially when something like this occurs. And, I was talking about this last week, even before I realized this Revelation riddle with the NCAA title game. And, of course, it's connected to the Waco siege, which is all about the return of a Messiah, David Koresh, right? And just as another teaser, I might have mentioned this in another video, but this traces back to the 50s and the publishing of The Return of the King, right, by J.R.R. Tolkien. The Return of the King was published on October 20th of 1955. And the author, J.R.R. Tolkien, check out how old he was on this date. So he was born on 1/3/1892. He was exactly 23,300 days old. Remember, this is the Gematria of Messiah, 233. Recall how we got these two twin eclipses creating an X over the United States? This first eclipse was August 21st, which is the 233rd day of the year. The second eclipse, which falls on 4/8 in 2024. Think about how 2 times 24 is 48. There's exactly 346 weeks between these eclipses. And notice how the Messiah equals 346. Now, the halfway point, the exact halfway point of these two great American total solar eclipses is what I call the Great Jesuit Eclipse, December 14th of 2020. This was the only total solar eclipse of the year 2020. And notice how total solar eclipse equals 202, like the year 2020. That total solar eclipse kicked off lunation 12/12. See? 12/12. And total solar eclipse equals 12/12. And now we get this big Revelation lunar eclipse before lunation 12/18. Just like total lunar eclipse is 12/18. So it's all coded for now. It's crazy. It really is. But also consider how coronavirus pandemic sums to 220, just like 2020, the year that this all started. Donald John Trump was the president, 220. Revelation is the 66th book of the Bible. That equals 220. Ortho Corona Virinae, which is blamed for the coronavirus pandemic, is 220. Operation Warp Speed was enacted to get the vaccines out. That sums to 220. Remember, Master Builder number 220. It's considered to be 22, the master builder number. So, years ago I said, man, maybe there's a certain group who thinks their Messiah is coming back during this period of time, and they've literally numbered our whole calendar since the 20s for these events. So, wow, I can't believe people are still commenting. Oh, yeah, it's true. I am getting a lot of views on that 666 video with coronavirus. And a lot of haters in there, of course, but those same people are taking an experimental vaccine for a flu, so they're the idiots. All right, guys, that will do it for this video. Again, links in the description below if you want to learn more, but that'll do it for me. I gotta eat. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you next time, everyone. See ya.